registration in CRA, so he's going to speak just tonight about some of the practical elements about making an application for registration and the work that he and his team are carrying out. So now I'll hand you over to Eamon.
Good evening, everybody. How are you? We've a cosy group, which is great. So, first I just want to thank Andrea for inviting me to speak here today. As she said, I head up registration reporting the charge regulator. I manage about a team of 7. There's 3 case officers who are going through all our caseload with some support team. We'll probably deal with about 2,500 email and telephone queries per month. So it's a very busy office. And as you know, we're in establishment phase. So I thought I'd start off. I'm not an expert in charity law. I'm getting better at interpreting the Charities Act, but I think some of these quotes anyway maybe explain where we are at in terms of our thinking. So you guys are the experts, by the way, so you probably know all of these. The law of charity is a moving subject. I think that's the Penzel case. I'm not sure if it's right. And this one I like. So it may be thought among reasonable people that any disposition that wishes others well is charitable. This is not the sole criterion in constructing a charity. And I think that goes to the heart of the matter. The charity regulator was set up, or the charity regulator authority was set up in 2009 with the Charities Act, but the common law that exists coming from 1601 or 1634, that still plays a major part in the work that we do, and particularly where we talk about the test that we do, which is called the public benefit test for charities. So I'm going to cover 3 topics. The first is just a quick overview of who we are and what we do. I will then take you through the registration process, principles we apply in assessing, I suppose the application process, the principles we apply, and then some detail around the assessment of that public benefit test. I should say that the handouts that you have are not totally aligned to the presentation I'm giving, because I made changes. So it's more or less there. Sometimes you might find that page is not there, but if you do, just give a look at the screen. And the last area I'll cover, which is going to be the subject of guidance, which should be issued next month once it passes our board, is on core trustee duties and the ongoing requirements of charities to comply with the Charities Act. Okay. So who we are, and what do we do? So, okay, our mission. So our statement strategy was launched in 2016. That states that our mission is to regulate the charity sector in the public interest, to ensure charities comply with the law, and to support best practice in the governance, management and administration of charities. Our vision, I'll go back to our values, but our vision is for a vibrant, trusted charity sector valued for the public benefit it provides. Certainly, and that's informed by our values, so openness and transparency, fairness in how we do our work, proportionality, which is a key thing. If we look at what I can see from, say, 5,000 returns from charities, about 50% have income under 250,000 per year. About 11% of what we've seen, and it's probably a lower number because smaller charities haven't all met their requirements, about 11% of income of less than 10,000 per year. And the average income is 2.5 million, but that amount, that 2.5 million, is skewed by the top 50. Most of actually are government bodies. You talk about hospitals, universities, care providers. Their income is probably into the 550 million, 300 million. So it's a very diverse sector. There's probably, if taking the charity sector as well, there's probably about 50 different mini sectors within there. So we've talked about the different purposes, but it's a very diverse sector. State is heavily involved. I'll go into a bit much of as well. I'll talk a little bit about the types of organisations that are applying for status. So, our key role, we're responsible for supervising charities in Ireland. Main functions: increase public trust and confidence in the management and administration of charitable trusts and organisations. We do that by establishing and maintaining a public register of charities. Another key function is to ensure and monitor compliance by charities with the provisions of the Act. Okay? To carry out investigations into charities where we deem it necessary. and to issue guidelines and code of conduct for the benefit of charities and trustees. And we would consider not the employees of the charities, but the people who are running the charities, the charity trustees. We would consider them to be our key, if you like, our key stakeholder. And that's who we deal with. If there's an issue with a charity, we go to the board. We don't deal with the employees. Okay, a stakeholder map. I don't know if it shows it very well. So our key stakeholders, I suppose, are the charities themselves, the public, the beneficiaries are really important, the people who benefit from the good work the charities do and protecting them. And then the Minister for Justice and Equality is our parent organisation, Department of Justice and Equality. Around that, there are a huge number of other stakeholders, from legal professional accountants to the media and the media's attitude towards charities. The academic sector, really a broad range, and the donors obviously are very important. So, recent developments. In 2016 we launched a statement of strategy that sets out our plan for the first 3 years of operation. We are putting in place, well, the Minister will be putting in place new regulations for accounting and reporting for charities. So that states the type of accounts they have to publish, which will be to a SORP standards, what we want, and also their reporting requirements, which will be quite significant for the larger charities, the amount of information that they'll need to provide. They'll probably come into place in about 2018 or 19. We got our full powers of investigation in September 2016, and that saw the commencement of Part 4, which deals with what's called the Protection of Charitable Organisation, but it deals with investigations. Since then, we imposed sanctions, intermediate sanctions on one animal welfare charity in Kerry. They hadn't got proper books of account as their duty. We issued intermediate sanctions, and since then they've actually corrected that matter, and we're not going to prosecute. We prosecuted a individual who was holding his charity shop and soup kitchen out to be a charity when it wasn't. We prosecuted him for acting for an unregistered organisation, and it turned out that after prosecution he had 20 convictions, some for theft and fraud. And we no confidence at all that any of the money that was being donated through the shop or elsewhere was being given to the charitable purpose. There was a significant private benefit involved. We have 2 investigations under Part 4 ongoing, one of which started before our public statements policy was released, so we didn't have a public statements policy, so we haven't told people about it. The second one, which shows the diversity of the sector, is to do with the art house cinema in Galway. There will be more, and they will have varying degrees of drama. Probably not as much drama as went with the Console controversy, which was before our powers, but there will be continuing scandal. There's a huge number of organisations or entities that we regulate. There will be a small percentage will cause difficulties, and we're going to deal with those. The other side then is about publication of guidance. So guidance for trustees, which some of my presentation covers, that will be issued hopefully after our board meeting next month. We have just recently published a concerns policy, so if someone raises any concerns with a charity, and if you have any of your clients or people come to you saying they're concerned about a charity, there is a mechanism for us to contact us, and we have a policy on the web and an online form for that. And our registration process guidelines, I expect they'll be ready probably the end of May. Big thing for us is a new IT system. We have no real IT infrastructure at the moment, and that really slows down our work. So we're out to tender. We're hopeful that first sort of the registration area and then the new website will be in place at the end of this year. Okay, so that's just an overview for you in terms of what we're doing. We have about 33 staff, up from when I started 2 years ago, up from about 11. We had 7 staff in the charity commissioners and 4 staff trying to do all the regulation, and 16 board members. So we had 11 staff and 16 board members to start with. And then towards the end of 2015, that's started to rebalance. We're then 14 board members now and 33 staff. So what I'm really here to talk to you about is the registration process. And the first question people often ask is, well, if we're supposed to register, will you tell us what is a charity? What is a charity? So I think we'll pull up again, which maybe gives an idea of how difficult it can be to give people straight information. Now, somebody might tell me which case this was in, but Delaney says that there is little to be gained by definitions, legislative or otherwise, in charity matters. Judge Duffy says, charity is an artificial conception which during the last 300 years, it's now 400 years, under the guidance of pedantic technicians, I like that part, under the guidance of pedantic technicians, seems to have strayed rather from the intelligent realm of common sense. I think he then goes to go on about some weird cat refuge that he couldn't understand why it was charitable. But what that illustrates, I suppose, is that the definition of what a charity is a difficult one. So, in our Act, it doesn't go into what the common law precedent is, but in our Act it just states the following. A charity must have a charitable purpose only or charitable purpose exclusively. That word is important. Traditionally, there's always been three main types. So, prevention, relief of poverty, the advancement of education, the advancement of religion, and then in more modern times, there's been another 11 or so categories added, which is a very broad range of purposes, which goes from promotion of health or the relief of sickness, two, which would deal with environmental protection or environmental sustainability, animal welfare, community development, promotion of voluntary and civic work, advancement of, this is just one purpose, it's advancement of arts, culture, heritage or sciences. So it covers such a broad range, but that's the first criteria that any organisation, they must have a charitable purpose only, and it must fit within the criteria. One of the ones that is quite controversial, I suppose, is promotion of human rights, which is not included as a charitable purpose. The Act doesn't say that it couldn't be, and it's probable that we will have we'll probably have some ruling at some point in the next 12 to 18 months where a human rights organisation will look for charitable status, and we will have to make a determination. If that's a refusal, it will be up to the Charity Appeals Tribunal to decide on that one. And it's possible that human rights, promotion of human rights will be added back in. For the moment, it's not included. The organisation must provide a clear public benefit, and this is the difficult one. The basic explanation of that is that the benefit must be public and there must be an identifiable benefit. And thirdly, all income and property, aside from operation and maintenance, must be used to advance the charitable purpose. So that's what the Act tells us are the main criteria for what a charity is. Some other characteristics. Sporting organisations manage to lobby heavily, I think, and manage to get themselves excluded. So in other jurisdictions, sporting organisations are charities, but in Ireland they're specifically excluded. Other excluded bodies, parliamentary parties, Fine Gael or Fianna Fáil can't be a charity. I think that's probably a good thing. Others will be chambers of commerce, trade unions, and all of those are actually specifically excluded in the Act. Other characteristics of charities, and I'm drawing on this probably mainly from a book that we use in the office a lot. It's Kerry O'Halloran, I like his name, similar to my own. Kerry O'Halloran, who's written, I think books, what we would believe is probably the definitive book on charity law in Ireland. So, the other characteristics, limitations on political activities is very controversial. The Act says that where an organisation is pursuing political advocacy and furtherance of its charitable purpose, that's okay, but there is no other real guidance around this. In other jurisdictions, they've tried hard to put limits on charities, but those limits haven't been successful. Una Breen, who I would consider to be probably one of the top, she's an academic, one of the top voices, if you like, from that sector, says on the political side that the Charities Act basically left a practical outcome that there is now no guidance on this issue of advocacy, no power for the regulator to issue guidance on the matter, no case law in Ireland that deals directly with this issue, and therefore no clarity in the Republic as to what political activities the charity may lawfully engage in without placing its charitable stakes at risk. So that's what she says is where we are with that. What we would look at ourselves is if a parliamentary party candidate is on a board with charity, we would look at that. If we feel that the organisation is merely a political campaign, that would be an issue. But beyond that, we're quite careful not to sort of step into that realm, because in Canada they did it, and it turned out that everybody that they were taking on for political advocacy was advocating against the government. They were basically more conservative than the government that was in place. In England, they've lost themselves in the courts over some of this, so I don't think it's something we'll be doing, but it is a consideration. So in general, charities should not be political. charities should be independent. In Ireland, a vast number of our charities are not independent at all. They are state bodies. The HSE is a charity. Okay, a lot of the hospitals that are charities here, they're really state-owned, state-appointed, state-controlled. So the question is why? And in other jurisdictions, they take a stronger line about the need for independence among trustees. Obviously, a charity may take many legal forms. Okay. So, what type of organisations have we seen applying? So there's a very broad range of organisations that we deal with. I suppose in trying to put a bit of shape on them, I've tried to break them down to 5 types. And what we would do is we would use this to try and work out which type is more risk, has a higher risk for the sector than others. The main one, which do a lot of fundraising, is the likes of, say, the Irish Cancer Society. So they focus on charitable support. They receive a great majority of their income from public donations. Okay, that's the first type, and that's your classic charity. The second ones are the ones we would say, like say John O'Gall's or others. They're effectively providing government services. They get most of their money from government. So most of their money by contract or otherwise is given from government. And they don't necessarily do any fundraising. The third then is membership organisations. So there are a lot of organisations with membership. Some of them will actually be, for example, they will see some membership organisations from within professions, although not trade unions. Fourth type then are infrastructure providers, whether that's a physical infrastructure. So we have a lot of community centres, a lot of that type of thing where they'll be applying for charitable status. You would also have others which you might consider to be support that coordinate a frontline organisation, provide support to delivering their services. And last, I suppose, which many of you may be more familiar with, is trust and grantors. And their focus is solely on granting funds to further the charitable purpose. So they're the 5 types. Okay. Benefits of being a registered charity. Well, firstly, it allows charitable organisations to operate legally. That's the most important thing. Charitable organisations are going to find that if they have not registered with us, that they are going to stop being able to access corporate funding, to be able to access grants, to be able to access tax benefits. So to operate legally, you must be registered. Secondly, it provides an opportunity. The sector has been damaged by all the scandals. The sector itself needs to ensure that it's operating to the highest standard and that it's open and transparent. When you give your money into a bucket or you make a donation yourselves, same as myself, you want to know that charity is operating to a high standard. The way they do that is ensuring that they are transparent and accountable for what they do and they operate to a high standard of administration and governance. Anyone who's running a charity, nobody owns that organisation or its assets. That organisation and its assets are being cared for, or there's custodians who are looking after it, and it can never stray to the stage where it becomes somebody's personal. We see that as a major risk, and we see examples of that where somebody believes that the charity's identity and their identity are the same. Okay, the third then is a sound basis for donors and volunteers to donate and support. So we want our register, which will improve, it'll actually be able to do a huge amount of things next year that it doesn't now, but we want you to go on and when somebody calls to your door or you look to somebody, you can look up their number, which they'll be showing you, and it'll tell you what you need to know. We want charities themselves to see a value in that. So over time, if you have your registration, you have your trust mark, that you will get better outcomes in terms of funding and support because of that. The big thing for charities is it is enabling them to get grants, tax incentives and other ancillary benefits. At the moment, just so everyone's clear, if you're dealing with any clients, you cannot apply for the revenue for charitable status unless you've got your reward from us. We are now the deciders on whether you're a charity or not, and they just make a tax designation choice. So you need to apply to us first. When you're finished our process, then you apply to revenue. It obviously could feel very long-winded, but we have agreed to common requirements with them, which I'll talk a little bit about later. Okay, I'm going to do it for time. Okay, 7 steps. So the 7 steps for applying, it's all done online, so people will need to go online. You go onto our website, charitiesregulator.ie, there is guidance and there's guidance there for people who are looking to make, I would suggest they use that. The guidance will improve over the course of this year. an application is made on behalf of the trustees. So at the board or committee level, they need to make a decision that they're going to apply and what details they're going to put into the application. The actual mechanism then is you need to create a user account on our online system in order to make an application. Once the application has been prepared, it can be printed off and reviewed by the board. They need to gather necessary paperwork, which I'll go into a bit later. They complete and submit the application and then work with our team in answering queries before we reach a decision. Guidance on our website, there's some guidance there that will help you in terms of, we have model constitutions, we have both for CLGs and for associations or non-companies. We don't have a standard trust deed, but I expect we will have a standard trust deed in the next couple of months. There's also some FAQs there if people have some of the common queries that we get. So the application itself, there is quite a comprehensive set of information. There's probably over 150 pieces of information that are required, which sounds like a lot. The Charities Act, Section 39, sets out the information you require. It is quite lengthy and detailed. The main areas, so we need some basic or main details. We need the addresses that they operate from, including countries if they operate abroad, the charitable purpose and main object, the activities that they have carried out or intend to carry out in furtherance of each purpose, the charity trustee details, fundraising plans and any professional fundraisers that they engage with, and bank details. On top of that, they must attach a constitution or trust deed. They must attach any financial accounts or statements if they've been operating previously. If they have no financial statements, we will look for bank statements. We will look for what they've been doing for the previous 6 months. They need to provide a declaration form signed by each of the trustees. And if they're working with young or vulnerable people, they need to give us a safeguard policy, or they need to show us proof that they're getting their volunteers and individuals guarded vetted. Okay, so principles of how we assess applications. It's informed by the provisions of the Act. Our approach is to be independent, fair, non-discriminatory, consistent, efficient and effective, transparent, proportionate and accountable. So they're the principles that we try and abide by. Just going to skip down and just pick out anything there that's key. So one of the things that we do is we use the ARI principle. So that means that we do often call the trustees for the proposed organisation in and we interview them. Some of those interviews are very genial and easygoing, and some of them can be quite confrontational, depending on who we're dealing with. But we do assess the attitude of the applicant. We look and form a view of the potential risk of that organisation being awarded charitable status and the impact of that risk. And we apply that then to people who are making applications. We have had quite a number of applicants that were no more than people chancing their arm, who we had no confidence, and it was actually when we called them in for interview that we were able to establish what was really going on. Other key principles: we will be transparent as far as we can. All of our decisions, any decision we make to refuse a status is then appealable to the Charity Appeals Tribunal. I think one of your members is the chair of that, Patrick O'Connor, based in Mayo. Is he a member of STEP? No? O'Connor Associates Mayo. So everything we do is open to scrutiny, and obviously they will have a chance to appeal that we made the wrong decision, and all of our process will be reviewed over. We do inform along the process, and I'll go into that. There is a right to reply at all stages. And if we are intending to refuse, we will send a notice of intention to refuse and allow the applicant a chance to reply to say their opposing view. So we will consider that. We do work with other statutory agencies, not just the Revenue, but the HSE and others. So if someone's applying and they promise funding or they have been funded by another government entity, we will look for information to verify that they're happy with that organisation. Okay. So the principle, the main principle in the Act says that we shall refuse an application unless we're satisfied that the application is a charitable organisation. Process for assessment. So we do an initial assessment to ensure the application is complete. We've assessed 1,170 applications, and of those, about 1,000 were sent back as incomplete. Now that tells its own story. Part of the reason for that is our own IT system is very inflexible, but a lot of the time the quality of the applications can be quite poor. So once it passes completeness checks, it's then passed into a queue for assignment to case officer. Case officer will then carry out full assessment. Queries will be issued to the applicants. We will meet with the applicant in about 50% of cases. A case officer will make a recommendation. That's reviewed by a manager in my office, and they will make a recommendation to me that we approve conditions, pass to a risk panel. So we have an internal risk panel that reviewed what's deemed higher risk applications or to seek further information. It's at the moment, we have a scheme of delegation coming in place, but at the moment it's our chief executive who signs off on all applications. We will approve with conditions. And as I referred to there, we do have a risk panel which is made up of other senior managers within the regulator. So where we have high risk, the case officer will bring a recommendation. We'll have a robust discussion about what the next stage should be. It's very important that we always ensure that the applicant has a right to apply at every stage, particularly if we're looking to make reviews. Any refusal must be made by the board. We haven't actually made any refusals yet. It's likely that they will happen in the next month or two. You will only probably really know about those if they appeal. So again, any decision, positive or negative, is notified to the applicant in writing, and where a refusal, they have 21 days to appeal to the Charity Appeals Tribunal. Okay. So the main thing first is the detailed assessment that's carried out by the case officer. So the first thing the case officer needs to do is to check the main object. The main object is at the top of your constitution or trust deed, and that states, it should state, what the organisation is being set to achieve, where that benefit will extend to, who will benefit, and how will the goals be achieved. Most main objects are very loose, they tell you very little, and what we try to do is to ensure that those questions of what you're set up to achieve, who will benefit, where is that benefit extended to, and how will you achieve your goals, that is captured within the main object where possible. We check, have they selected appropriate charge of purpose? Some people just tick every box, they're going to do everything. But we will do a specific test on each charge of purpose. We authorise organisations per purpose, so they don't get to tick every box unless they can prove that they're going to do that. We would also check that within the Constitution, we would check the powers that they give themselves. I have one case where they put in a clause that said X person will be the chief executive, and when X person doesn't want to be the chief executive, they will then become a member of the board. And if X passes away before, then their seat will be given to X's daughter, and if X's daughter hasn't reached the age of 21, then X's wife will hold the seat until X's daughter reaches 21. That was written in, and also they had written in a power that if X was on the board, there had to be a unanimous vote. But if X wasn't on the board, there only had to be a majority vote. So you do see people giving themselves these extra powers, that again comes back to what we're seeing in terms of founder syndrome. So the standard clauses that you have, they're similar to the ones for revenue. Income and property must be applied, and there are restrictions on trustees getting paid. In the case of winding up, all charitable property must be given to another charity with a similar purpose, and if you cannot do that, you need to come back to us for consent if you're going to give it to. And the other thing which we haven't quite fully formed says, for certain changes to your constitution, you will need our approval. Now, we haven't actually issued a schedule of what those certain changes are, but they will be high-level changes. So where before you go to the revenue for any change, we will not want to approve every change. We only want to approve changes that we feel affect your charitable status. Anyone proposing a name must get consent. There's a test that we do on that. Effectively, it boils down to, it can't be so similar as another name as to be misleading, or so similar to another charity or to a government body. Obviously, an organisation must not be an excluded body, and the trustees must not be disqualified under Section 55, which covers such things as bankruptcy, insolvency if they have a previous conviction in front of a jury, if they're indicted for an offence or disqualified as a pension trustees. They're the reasons you can't be a charity trustee. The public benefit test then. So what I want to say about the public benefit test is that it is complex. The test itself appears straightforward, but in applying it for each application it's quite complex. And to some extent it is subjective. So there is no black, white, pass, fail, yes, no. There is subjectivity involved. The first one, I suppose, is are the activities of charity intended to benefit the public or a section of the public? And is that section of the public sufficiently broad? That would be the first criteria. The second is private benefit. So an example is a school. So a school provides a public benefit in that it's focused on advancing education and providing education to children. Okay. There's a private benefit involved. The private benefit is that every child who attends gets educated. So they come away with a private benefit of that. But that private benefit is reasonable. It is ancillary. It's a part of what they do. They couldn't do it without doing that. And it's necessary to further the public benefit. In the case which we had previously was an example was that if a charity is setting up to provide supports or services for the blind, if they provided braille books, that would be seen to be a support that was furthering their charitable purpose. But if they provided housing, that would seem to be not, because the housing wasn't brought about by their need, the fact that they were blind. That wasn't the reason. So that's not furthering your public benefit. But I had this discussion with our solicitors who are Beecham's, saying that if the house was specially adapted for people who are blind, and there was some charge involved that was fair, would that be okay? And he said, well, that probably would be okay. But that shows you that the concepts here are not clear, and they're not always that clear, and we have to assess each case on its merit. Okay, on that also, and this again, these are all coming from the Act, are there any limitations imposed on the class of persons who may benefit from the activities of the charity? And if so, are those limitations justified and reasonable? So a principle of any charitable organisation would be that they should have a policy around if somebody can't afford to pay for a service. There might be a service charge there might be an entry fee or a membership fee. If somebody can't afford to pay that fee, what policies are processed? Now, it could be that they have a policy that says our membership fee is €20, but if you're unemployed or if you can't pay, then the membership fee is waived, or it's €5, whatever it is. But they need to have a policy to ensure that nobody is prevented from benefiting because of their means, if you like. And usually when they say class of persons, they mean the poor. Is there a charge payable for any service provided? And if so, is the amount of charge, again, this is similar to what we just discussed, is it similar to like the amount of class of person may benefit? And then is there any potential for disbenefit? So some charity, somebody holding themselves out to be a charity or hoping to be a charity could actually cause a disbenefit elsewhere. And that's something that we would look at. One of the things that's interesting is the equality legislation, and how equality legislation, if you're setting up a charitable purpose for women of a certain immigrant community, is that then against the Equality Act, that if I'm a man and not from that community, I can't benefit? So it's an interesting one. They've struggled with that in other jurisdictions. It hasn't become one for us yet. Okay, in general terms about the registration progress, it is thorough and robust. We see ourselves as a gatekeeper. We believe that initially, to begin with, we need to become very thorough in how we approach each application, from a point of view of ensuring that when we do move, and we're looking at moving at the moment more to a risk-based system for applicants, that we know the risks, that we've spent enough time going through a sufficient amount of applications to know every type of issue that can arise, so that when we don't check everything, we're not doing full verification checks, that we know why we have a proper rationale and I suppose a robust reason for doing so. The general quality of applications has been poor. Some applications can be very straightforward and well thought out, but in general, a lot of people who put them up and they may not be getting any support from any professionals, you know, it can be slapdash thrown on a page, nothing thought through. And often what people think is, oh, if I have a good idea, then you just need to give me the status and I can go and do what I'm going to do. But awarding the charitable status doesn't work like that. When we, generally I call it like playing tennis. When somebody sends in an application, I tell my team, your job is to make sure that you get queries back out to them, but you should make sure that as much as possible the ball is in the applicant's court and not in our court where we're delaying things. Generally speaking, we send out a letter. I would say on average, the average response time to a letter we send out is probably 2.5 to 3 months. And a lot of people saying, can you give us more time? That makes sense. If you're a voluntary board, you've got busy lives and you meet 5 or 6 times a year, it could take you one whole meeting just to consider the letter, delegate what has to be done, and then another meeting 6 weeks later to agree what the response is. But that's an issue. Our average processing time, okay, not from when people initially applied, okay, because we deem them complete. I've shown you that we do a completeness review. But at the moment, our average processing time from deemed complete to decision is 4 months. That does not mean that there will be some that will be in the system a lot longer, but that's the average at the moment is about 83 working days, which works out at about 4 months. Our experience to date, so I've covered some of this, but I didn't want to share the slide because it's more a subjective view of what we've experienced. I'll just find the slide. Okay, so a lot of applications represent an idea, what we call founder syndrome. There is no common understanding amongst the group, the board, what they're doing. There's an idea in one person's head, and they've got their friends or people that they know they're in business with, or maybe relatives. They've got them involved, and they're getting involved because the other person is passionate and they think this would be good to get involved in. They don't really know what they're doing, and they have no intention whatsoever of challenging the passionate driver. So what that sets up then is that these people will attend the board and they will never actually really engage. That it'll just be left to the person who really has the passion for it. We have consistent evidence of the applications, lack of planning, an absence of any documentation, no idea of what they're doing. Constitution, we've got a constitution recently from a Christian organisation with all of its objects relating to promotion of the Muslim religion, promotion of Islam. So obviously, and you see a lot of this copy and paste. So they've got one, we'll just copy and paste that. No idea of how they're going to carry out their charitable purpose or how they're going to finance carrying out their charitable purpose. So they really have no idea of how they're going to provide public benefit. They don't really understand the concept of that they must have a charitable purpose only. They seem to think that they can do a bit of business, they can do a bit of anything really that they decide that they're interested in, that they can do whatever they want. They're not clear that you must have clarity or certainty about the main object of what you're trying to achieve, and that you focus on delivering that. That if you go beyond that, you could be accused of breach of trust. The proposed trustees in general, they lack depth. Where they're running a reasonably sized organisation, they tend to all be from the same area or industry. They don't seem to seek out different skills, whether it's accounting skills or legal skills or other skills that they might need. Interestingly, we deal with Board Match Ireland who tell us that they have 4,500 very well qualified people who want to get on boards and can't, and they tell us that the biggest issue that they see is getting people off boards. That people like to be on boards. They might go down, might not even meet that often, or might attend that often. They'll go down at Christmas or once at the Flag Day just to show their face because of all the time they put into the board. But that really, there's a role for those people in the organisation, but that's not the role for them to be on the board. We see a lot of repetition and duplication. There's a charity providing the public benefit that's needed in an area, and somebody sets up a competing one. When we meet the trustees, we say to them, have you been involved in a trustee? Did you go and see something similar that's been done? Did you engage? Did you try and volunteer? No. We just want to set up our own thing. And that, maybe that's an Irish way of thinking, but that is not good for the sector as a whole. If an organisation is providing that public benefit in your area, you are free to set up a new charity, but you're going to be competing with them, and that organisation may need support. They may need your passion and ideas. But at least people should try and engage with another charity before making a decision, which is a big decision to set one up. And we're not seeing that. We see quite often people are not doing that. So that's, I suppose, the experience of what we've seen, and that's an issue both through guidance and support, and through, I guess, your profession and others. I do see a gap in the market, to be honest, and I used to work in bankruptcy, and funnily enough, when I worked in bankruptcy, we would have dealt, I don't know where many of your people involved with trusts in the States would have seen some, but in bankruptcy, the people who've taken over the bankruptcy advice market is a charity. There was one really smart barrister involved, and they have a financial QFA guy, but besides that, it's just David Hall and a few others setting it up, and they've cornered the bankruptcy market in terms of support, and they don't charge a fee. But outside of that, it's surprising to me that so few of the rest of the profession have actually got it. Now, the profession have, I suppose, in the bankruptcy area, they're providing different types of service and doing deals with creditors, but it was interesting that bankruptcy, I would have thought, would have been the preserve of people who really understood the law, and yet the people who took the lead were not necessarily people who understood the law. So it'll be interesting to see what happens, because there probably is a need for support for charities. But it'll be interesting to see where anyone comes up with a business model that will charge a small fee or will work out whatever the business model is in order to support charities. And those people will be expert in corner the market. They'll have an IT system, they'll be expert in corner the market. There will always be people who will come, whether that's from the religious sector or wherever it is, your typical clients who will come to you. But it'll be interesting to see who takes over the sort of the mass market in terms of not just making the application, but actually complying. I would say there's a gap in the market there anyway. Okay, we're getting to the last part of it now. So core trustee duties and ongoing requirements. So core trustee duties to be subject to trustee guidance. Very straight, in my view, very straightforward. Comply with your governing document. And the amount of people in charities who I'd say, if we said to them comply with your governing document, will ask us to give them back their governing document, because they won't know where their governing document is. That's quite common. They'll email us and say, can you send us our governing document? I think we gave it to you a few years ago. Charities need to look at their governing document and understand from how they're appointed onto the board to any of the issues. They should be using that as a guide. They don't. They tend to just run off and do what they're doing. The second one is that ensuring that your charity is carrying out its charitable purpose for public benefit. That's what they are licensed to do. If they're going off in all different directions and they're not providing public benefit for the charitable purpose they're authorised, they're going to find that we will be engaging with them. And that's really, it's for themselves, for the trustees to ensure that that's happening. Obviously ensure that you're registered, you're up to date with us, that you keep proper books of account, which is the same for companies, that you provide an annual report and return to us, accounts if necessary. Further duties which are more based in common law. You have a duty to act in the best interest of your charity at all times, to act with reasonable care and skill, to manage the assets of the charity effectively, to make appropriate investment decisions, and to disclose to us, which is a new requirement under Act, any reasonable suspicion of theft or fraud. There is protection for trustees who do that from prosecution. Obviously you'd inform the guards and any other people, but you do have a duty as trustees to disclose any reasonable suspicion of theft or fraud. Ongoing requirements for charities. This will be subject to something that will launch later in the year. I know I've said that quite a bit, and we'll be doing things later in the year, but this is very important. Charities are not publicising our number. They're not publicising that they're registered charity with us. They continue to publicise that they have a CHY number. I saw a TV ad recently from the Dogs Trust that had our number, so they were a regulated charity. Most organisations are still using the CHY number. Legally, they must promote that on their annual reports and everything else. They must do that. Websites, etc. They need to seek our consent to make certain changes. Any changes to the main object, any changes that will significantly change the powers available to them, they should look to seek our consent. If the charity decides to close, you need to tell us, and we also need your final accounts as well as details of what you intend to do with any remaining funds. They must keep details of their charity up to date on our online system. We must at all times have the name, position, start date and home address of all charity trustees. We don't publish the home address of charity trustees, but the other details we do. You need to tell us if a new charity is appointed or if the current charity resigns, and then you need to ensure that any bank account, and you can have a policy that supports this, but bank accounts generally should be signed off by 2 charity trustees. Obviously, if you're a very large charity, you will have a system in place that says over X amount the trustees will need to sign, but it's €500 or €1,000 that somebody on the executive will do that. Essential practices for charity: stick to your charitable purpose and objects, respect donor intentions. Really important in Irish law is donor intentions. So if somebody gives you money and it's for a particular purpose, you don't have the right to use it for any purpose if that donor has intended for you. So if you run a campaign for tsunami victims or something, and then perhaps that money wasn't needed for the tsunami, you can't just move the money elsewhere unless you've clearly told the donor this. In pursuing their purpose, the most important people we feel are the beneficiaries. That's the most important people, and that charity should, in pursue their purpose, protect the beneficiary. We've seen examples where wages and salaries have gone up in organisations. They've cut the services to beneficiaries. Now that can't be right. It can't be right that they're cutting. You shouldn't be paying yourself more money in a charity if you're cutting beneficiary services at the same time. Charities should know their obligations and duties. They should review their governing document regularly. At the board level, it's a unitary board system. Everybody should challenge at board level. There's no stupid question, and should encourage people to do that, to ask the silly question. The other thing is that the board should be engaged with their finances and ensure that the role of the auditor is clear, not just expect the auditor will do the job. They should discuss before the audit what the scope might be. We also advise all trustees that they should invest in training. Good governance is the key to better outcomes for their organisation. So we are here to help. We can be contacted through our online query system by email. Our phone lines are open 12:30 to 5. That will improve to full service this year. Our concerns line is open all the time, 9 to 6, as long as we usually manage from 9 to 6. And there's a new web form for concerns to be raised that will be treated in conference. So thank you for time today. Any questions?
In what period of time must charitable funds be expended? In other words, you accumulate money.
Yeah.
It's accumulated for a charity.
Yeah.
It must be applied for a charity. Is there a guideline on that?
So if I understand your question, the accumulation of funds, how long can a charity during time? Well, there's a couple of things. This will come in with our new accounting regulations. Charities will need to have a reserves policy. So they're keeping reserves or holding money over. They will need to have a policy on that that's clear. So sometimes there's good reason for a charity if they want to build something